Hey, good evening, and welcome to Happy Hour with Jason Sizemore. And joining me tonight in place of Leslie Connor is Will Sobel. Hi, Will.
Hi, Jason.
And our special guest this evening is Elliott Wink, contributing author to Robotic Ambitions, our anthology that we're currently funding on Kickstarter. And it has been funded, so it will be coming out, and we'll be including A Still Life by Elliot. It's nice to have you here, Elliot. How are you doing?
Thank you so much for having me on. I am doing well. For anyone who doesn't know me, I'm actually an English teacher. I teach middle and high school English, but I write fantasy and science fiction in my free time. So I'm really happy to have a story coming out with Apex and the Robotic Ambitions anthology.
Well, we're delighted to have your story, and bless you for being uh, what was it, middle school and grade school English teacher?
Middle school and high school. So
Oof.
Oh,
I
okay.
feel you.
Yeah.
Yikes.
Now, it's been my experience that high school English students um, are generally pretty well behaved and kind of into it, but the middle schoolers can be a handful. Ha- is this true or?
It's kid by kid. In general, the middle schoolers I think do have a little more energy. So yeah, they can be a bit more, excitable, but that can also be a lot of fun. So I find that I really like seeing all the different ages because they all have, really awesome parts about them and some that are challenging too. But
Yeah.
mm,
Do you had to deal with there's been a lot of censorship talk, especially with kids that age and like what the teachers are having them read. Do you find that you are having to push back against like the district for stuff of that nature?
So I happen to be in a school that gives me complete creative control over my curriculum,
Oh,
and
wow.
so I haven't. Yeah, I'm really, really super lucky. So I haven't had a lot of pushback over the choices that I make in my curriculum. Every once in a while, there's going to be a parent that's kind of upset that we've read something that goes against their personal morals or is they just felt is a little too mature for their child, but we just deal with those on a case to case basis and work with them and try and focus on what the literary merit of those things are because usually if an author has included something that's offensive to someone it's for a reason, so it's kind of
Hmm.
actually nice to have those conversations.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's a really good way to handle it. I do think that the communication aspect is the part uh, that is lacking often when parents misunderstand, a work of fiction. Um, so it's good to have dedicated people like yourself there to kind of, say, look, this isn't, just for shits and giggles, right? It's deeper stuff going on, and it's important that the kids learn this stuff.
Hmm.
Um, so your story, A Still Life, is actually was actually the very first story that was accepted into Robotic Ambitions. You were the first author that we invited to Robotic Ambitions, and there's a reason for that. So, a popular question that I get, and Leslie receives as well, is what they call rejector's guilt, rejector's remorse. Like, are there stories that we passed on that we feel bad and wish that we could, reverse time and change our decisions on? And, certainly it sucks having to reject any of the great stories that we read, but 99.99% of the time we have a very, forward facing view on such matters. Uh, there was this one story uh, that we both loved, and I'm not sure how we talked ourselves out of it, and it was yours. And it was called "A Still Life," and it's this wonderful, like, I don't want to give away too much because part of the joy of the story, I think, is reading and learning about what has happened in this world. But it does involve a robot who, over time, uh, picks up some degree of sentience, self awareness, and what that means to the entity and how that entity reacts to the world outside. Um, and Leslie and I, for like, it's about 2 or 3 years ago that you had sent this in, we still talked about the story. And when we were talking about coming up with an anthology idea, we were like, you know what would be a great anthology? Something like uh, the issues that were tackled in A Still Life. Um, so I know a lot of writers probably dream of like having an editor coming back on their hands and knees saying, please, please, may we have your story? We were wrong. Could you talk a little bit about like how that felt and the sense of like victory you may have felt with that?
um, well, I do remember. So I actually cried um,
Aw.
when I got that email. Um, I think it was a mix of things. Though it was actually sorry, this is very convoluted, but I woke up in the morning. I saw your email, and I was in shock. And then I told my husband, and I read it to him, and then I started crying. And he looks at me and he says, are you pregnant? Maybe you're pregnant. I was. So
Oh,
so I'm
wow.
currently 5 months pregnant, but that was
Oh,
actually
yeah.
that's the moment in my head that will always be attached to finding out that I was pregnant. So I had this really emotional reaction to it
Oh my
because
gosh.
I kind of felt like when I saw your email that I had kind of like blown it because I decided to put that story out there for some people to see, and I was kind of feeling like um, I was worried that you wouldn't want it anymore. And you know, getting that story all the way at least to your eyes and having it sit with you for a while had been like a really big accomplishment for me. Even though you guys didn't end up accepting it into Apex magazine at the time, but it so having you come back and actually say that you wanted it really did mean a lot. I remember looking at my husband. I was like, "This doesn't happen. I don't think this happens. I don't think
Yeah.
people reach out to you, years later for these stories that they've rejected." So I had a really strong emotional reaction, and I really am grateful that you thought of my story after so long. I was really surprised, but it just kind of I don't know. As a writer, you experience a lot of rejection, and it's sometimes hard to be confident in your abilities. And knowing that I had a story that stuck with great editors for a while was a nice resurgence of confidence for me too. So
We were just talking about this on our happy hour with Marie Vibert earlier this week about um, the feeling of rejection, even though your story is great because it doesn't fit with that at that time. Like Lesley was talking about building a magazine, and you've got 4 stories that are all about like dark folklore, dark fantasy, or fairy tales or something, and then you get a great story about robots, and it just doesn't fit in with what you're building. And so she was talking about how, like, yeah, I could sit on this for a little while, but like ultimately, if it doesn't fit with this theme or this idea that we're building, it doesn't work at that time. And I feel like this is like one of those perfect examples of that, of like Lesley and Jason regretting having this rejector's regret for so long, and then realizing like, oh, but we could fit it in here, is like a very cool full circle of that discussion of like how rejecting things sucks also.
Yeah, it is it is a very unusual thing to happen. And to be honest, Leslie and I figured that you probably had sold the story somewhere. Um, we did do a quick search for it and didn't find it on any of the other pro markets, but um, and that was my concern, was that it was somewhere that was posted that would keep us from being able to use it, even if it had been published elsewhere. Um, the fact that you had released it on Kindle, I thought was really cool, because it was, I was happy that you had gotten it out to the readers, but it meant that the zine readers and probably some of the anthology people that would be interested in reading it had not seen it. And since it inspired the anthology, it was such a great feeling to be able to reach out to you about that. Um, Leslie and I both were fearful that you would be like, no, you had your chance, you know, especially once you had mentioned that it had been put out as a KDP project. Um, I don't know if you still have it for sale out there, but people are welcome to look for it and to show their support.
I appreciate that. I think I might just still have the paperback up for some reviews there, but I'd much rather people buy the Robotic Ambitions anthology and get all of those other awesome stories that are going to be in there. So, yeah, I don't actually think so. I think Apex was the last place that I submitted that story.
Huh.
After that, I put it away for a little while, and then I actually decided to um, like start a small self-publishing journey where I wrote pieces specifically to be self-published. I have four works out right now, like with that intention. But a still life, I love that story, so I wanted to share it with people. So that was what I started with.
Well, that's wonderful. I hope that Robotic Ambitions helps bring more audience to your stuff. Um, and I certainly hope to see more work from you. Can you tell us a little bit about A Still Life, and without maybe spoiling it? I know that may be a bit of a challenge, but
Um, I mean, sure. I think I can talk maybe on it thematically a little bit without
yeah.
spoiling things. But I, when I was writing A Still Life, I think I got just very interested in the idea of routines, and being trapped in routines, because I think that that is something that we experience every day. It's really hard not to just become a creature of habit. And I started thinking about, what would it feel like to become aware that you were trapped in a routine, um, and that's kind of how I evolved the story. And without necessarily, I don't think this would necessarily spoil it, but you know that I had a different ending to that story
Mm-hmm.
when I submitted it to you, and I ended up revising it, and I'm really happy with the new ending that it has, because I think that it um, reflects on that theme in a more positive way. And I'm really a person who's drawn to pretty dark endings, but sometimes they don't always communicate the best messages. So I think that the message that that ends up communicating is a little bit more positive, especially about the idea of becoming aware, breaking out of your routines, those kinds of things. So, and I really liked in that story, one of my, there aren't a lot of characters, but there
Mm-hmm.
are two androids. One is Addie and one is Lydia. Um, And I really tried to contrast the idea of, somebody who is unable to break from routines and protocols and rules and those kinds of things with somebody who um, is, or at least is trying to. And what happens to them in the story is, I think, representative of some of those ideas too. But yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was especially brilliant how you took the the age-old story of someone being trapped in a routine and finding meaning in life outside of that routine and transfixing it onto an artificial entity. Um, and the journey that you showed, you have the reader go through as your protagonist gradually gets a little more aware of what's going on, and uh, the pity that this uh, that the android has for the other android who is not experiencing uh, this consciousness. Um, it really affected me, and um, I, for one, found the rewritten ending to be much stronger, and um, I really liked the direction you took it. It may surprise people that I prefer the less darker ending that you came up with over the kind of downer ending that was originally part of it. Uh, but it does make a much stronger statement overall. So good job on being self-aware and um, doing that.
I'm glad you liked the change too.
For those of you who want to read the new ending and support Robotic Ambitions, it is available for you to read right now if you back Robotic Ambitions. There's a backers only update that you get that has the full story of the still life in it. So if you have taken all of these vague hints about what this story is, and want to know, go kick $8 to the Kickstarter, unlock the digital copy for yourself when it comes out, and also get access to a still life right now. And if all the vagaries here aren't enough for you, we have links to 3 different full reviews to a still life from book reviewers, book talkers, and some other cool folks. You can find it right on the Kickstarter campaign page, because this one's been a long time coming, like Jason said, and new ending right there for you on the update page. Old ending still on KDP, so if you want to slice it up for yourself, is that right, Elliott?
I think the KDP has the new
okay.
Yeah,
okay.
Has the only people who have seen the old ending are Lesley and Jason.
Gotcha. Okay. Never mind, I'm a liar.
Well, I would recommend people read the new one and reach out to Elliott and be like, hey, I really love the still life. Is there going to be like a second version sometime?
Get
you know.
I mean, if people are asking, maybe. I do think it's a worse version.
Yeah. I'm curious. The reviews that we got back from, it's essentially a novelette. It's like 7,700 words. Will was like, "Hey, this is a great story. Let's send it out and see if people want to review it in advance of the Kickstarter." And I was like, "That's kind of a weird idea. I'm not sure anyone's going to want to do that." And then we had a handful of reviewers who did, and universally, they all came back and were exuberant about the story. So, when we published the results of these reviews, were you like, yeah, Sizemore, Connor, in your faces, look what you missed out
No, no, I wasn't like that. I I I always really appreciate kind reviews. They give you warm fuzzies inside. But it just, yeah, it made me feel good that, again, we have, more voices, and maybe more professional voices too, um who like my story, which is fantastic. But, I never begrudge any editors who have rejected my work. I understand that,
on?
you guys get so much gold, and you have hard decisions to make. So I really try not to take it personally. So don't worry, I hold no grudges.
The thing I'm gonna take away from that is that Jason publicly admitted that my mad ideas paid off in the end. There was that
Yeah.
little sliver in there where he was like, "Will had this idea and it worked," and I'm holding on to that. That's gonna keep me going for the rest of the week.
It was a good idea. I really loved reading the reviews and of a still life, and it was a great like pre-launch marketing idea. So well done, Will. I
Oh,
will
oh,
applaud you.
we're getting more will praise. I'm stocking
Yeah.
up for another week.
Well, I was sitting here thinking, I'll bet Will is going to pop up and tell Elliot that she's missing an opportunity to rub the error of the editorial decision in my face.
I
Um,
I think you've done it well enough for the both of us, frankly.
okay. Well, I do it because I love the story, and just I'm happy with how the whole scenario has turned out, that we were able to get Elliot for the anthology.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and um, I'm just I'm loving all aspects of the anthology, and it's coming at a great time, with the public uh, intercourt discussion about AI and art, and um, Chat GPT writing fiction. And I saw today there was some stuff about AI writing code, which I know isn't new, but there was some new tools released that had people concerned. So I was going to ask our guest, what's your take on all of the AI craziness, and maybe any concerns that you may have about it?
Well, it certainly feels a little crazy. So I look at this in two lenses. The first is as a teacher. So, you know, AI now can write entire essays for students with ChatGPT. I actually had my first instance
Never
of
known.
plagiarism with ChatGPT. Um, but fortunately, it's kind of easy to spot. Like it's not. I was kind of worried that it would be I don't know. Maybe as time goes on, it'll be kids start doing it for everything, right? That the very first assignment you give them, they use ChatGPT, and then they kind of build up this voice, for themselves through the AI. But as it is now, and as a teacher, I get to know my students' voices pretty quickly in the writing that they do for me. So when I saw a ChatGPT essay, I knew it was not my student, and then it was just a matter of, they have these checkers now, like that can predict the probability of AI versus human written, and so those are super helpful. So as an educator, I was really nervous when it first came out, but now I'm not as nervous. I don't think it's going to be as concerning of a tool in that regard. But I do think that, like, I've been hearing about, was it Clark's World that closed their submissions because they had so many AI submissions in a month and everything. I worry about it in terms of closing availability for authors to submit, because I know, like, you would have never seen a still life if you had to close unsolicited submissions because you can't have your slush readers or your first readers reading hundreds and hundreds of AI submissions and using their time that way. And so I worry about it for unknown authors, especially being able to find markets and query in the same way that they have before. I think that
Mm-hmm.
could be a real concern. Is it just kind of like, and the same thing with self-publishing, just people flooding the market with things that are not necessarily valuable. One of the biggest criticisms I've heard about ChatGPT is that sometimes it just doesn't make sense. Like, it sounds like a person, but it doesn't, it's not going to know what it's doing in terms of maybe themes and narrative and actual cohesive storyline and everything. And so people might trust authors less, almost,
Mm-hmm.
whether that's on the publication side or on the reader side. So yeah, I I'm maybe more wary in that lens, but we'll have to see how it shakes out, I guess.
Yeah. Uh, the aspect that bothers me about it is the impression it may give people that who already think, that writing is an easy profession. So many people think that, that they can just jump in and write a story or a book, and it's certainly not the case. Um, but now when they hear that, an AI can create something that causes um, a professional editor like Neil Clark concerns, um, it, it cheapens the profession, the view of the profession a little bit. And so that's my current big worry, because kind of like you, I'm not really terribly concerned of the immediate future, um, because technology is still imperfect. But who's to say in 20 years, um, someone like the protagonist in your story decides, you know what, I'm going to write a story. Uh, how will we tell between an artificially created work versus one created by, an organic human? So,
Mm-hmm.
um,
I like to think that even maybe 100 years from now, we'll still be able to tell, because I think that humans are we're not fully logical, and we don't always, I don't know, we don't always think in ways that a code would make sense to think in, almost. Like, I think that we do so much in our subconscious, and that ends up being really meaningful on the page. And I don't know how you would necessarily train an AI to do something similar to that. So I think that I've heard at some point that one of the markers of, like, civilization being like really developed is that they start giving more time and resources and effort towards art and creation and things like that. And so I think that as long as we can, continue to value those things, that will be able to keep the human element of them, if that makes sense.
mm-hmm. Yeah, I hope you're right. And that, like, human created art doesn't become like boutique items.
Mm, I hope
Um,
so too.
so, Will, you not only do you work in the book publishing side, but you're also very active in the gaming
I am.
side of creation and art. What's our gaming brethren? Are they having concerns of this nature? How are they dealing with it?
Yeah, there's been a lot of talk, especially around Chat GPT because people have started asking ChatGPT to design games. So, someone will type in, I want a game like XYZ, and ChatGPT will come back and make a game. And it's a lot of people, most people in my circles are in the same realm that Elliott is in, because there's a psychological, behavioral element to game design of like, okay, there has to be tension, push pull of decision making, but then there also has to be that serotonin release of, oh, I did a good thing, and therefore my brain feels happy about that, right? And ChatGPT and these other AI assisted writing things are able to put together like rules that function, but not necessarily with the heart and soul that a good game lets people experience in the same way. So, it's kind of like, rolling a die in Dungeons and Dragons. When you roll real high on that roll that really matters and that's very crucial to success, is great because of the human element of it, but is also, the game is designed in a way so that those crucial elements are more personal, right? And with Chat GPT, there's kind of like, okay, roll a die, and it'll tell you to do something, but is not necessarily intrinsically tied to the emotional stakes of, yeah, we needed to do that, and oh crap, I can't believe we didn't do that.
Do you see AI ever, not ever, but in the near future, like doing things like becoming a dungeon master, and like you can go online and join AI assisted DM games? And
I really hope not. Because I no, I don't think so. And I think that, looking in gaming at things like Critical Role, where you have like actual actors and stuff portraying characters in the Dungeon Master and creating this narrative. Part of that, the reason why those things are so successful is because of the passion and the emotional element that those people bring into the game, right? Like, people love watching them play even though they're not playing, and they love that because of the human component to it. And I just don't think that AI has the ability to um, write or design their way into those highs and lows in the same way.
so one of the things that makes Elliott's story ring so powerful to me is her AI kind of learns uh, the nuance of quote unquote humanity from the person that created her. I think when I say her, I think the entity thinks of itself as a her. Um, so to me, that kind of feels like maybe a learned uh, thing. Like it, I know what you're talking about, and there's like intuition and the emotional element, but you have a new being that has awareness that these things exist, and that they know that if they can manipulate them properly, that they can get desired behaviors from others. Um, and these are the kind of themes and ideas that I'm hoping that the other stories and robotic ambitions address. Um, did when you wrote the story years ago, um, did you have like Elliot a concern about the future of AI, or was it merely, not merely, but was the story of this artificially created entity um, acquiring some degree of consciousness, like a placeholder for like a grander metaphor about routines and people escaping them?
So, I will admit that I don't develop my stories with such intentionality initially. Uh, I actually think so. I This is like 5 years ago that I wrote this story. So if I think back, I'm pretty sure a lot of what drives my stories initially is like an image. Like I'll get an image or like and a feeling attached to it and develop from there. And I saw this android at a dilapidated hotel with no guests. Like that was my initial image there. And I actually think my initial intention was kind of the consequences of what we create in terms of
Hmm.
technology and what we then leave behind. When mankind ultimately is no more. So I actually think that that was the genesis of that story, and thinking about how we'd have all of these processes and automations that just continued on and on and on and never stopped, even though we weren't there to you know enjoy or maintain them or anything like that. But in that world and in that image, I really liked the idea of you know one of them gaining awareness and gaining sentience and realizing that we should have never done that to her in the first place. It's almost like we have all these things to serve us, but is that cruel to some degree? And I think usually the answer is no. They're machines, they can't think, but what if they could? So that I
Yeah.
think was a big motivation for that story for me. And I do think I wrote Addie almost like a child, in terms of
Hmm.
her discovery of things and discovery of that, her creator, Trevor, was cruel to her to some degree in the way that he treated her. And, you know, they didn't always, yeah, just like discovering those little pieces and discovering what it means to be human. So I think that in my mind, she was more of a child and not necessarily. I didn't create that story or that character with any thought of harm or maliciousness or danger. I think it was
Hmm.
um, so yeah.
Um, I do think that the approach of Addie coming to awareness and having a childlike view of things certainly feels like how it would actually happen. And I, the realization when she comes to the realization that some of the actions that her creator put her through could be perceived as cruel, um, I think was the key in her awakening, and was like the crucial moment in the story that kind of the switch happens. And from that, she learned empathy and pity, started pitying her um, uh, companion. And um, gosh, I really hope that everyone who hasn't read the story and has backed the Kickstarter goes out and reads it so they can kind of get a sense of what we're talking about. It's just really well done, and it's thematically there's lots of layers, and it's interesting hearing your take of the creative process, and then hearing how like Will and I reacted and how we viewed the thematic issues going on. So um, yeah, if you have $8, do it for Will.
Do it for Will.
Yeah.
There's
Pledge, read A Still Life.
Mm-hmm. There's also a lot of other stuff coming up for Robotic Ambitions. So if you haven't gotten a chance to take a look at it, um, right now we're funded, so we have 9 featured authors like Elliott, Marie Vibert, Cherie Renee Thomas, a bunch of other cool folks, and then we have 9 slots for people through submissions, which we should be opening next week.
On the 13th.
Yeah,
So
so
that's
on
Monday.
So get your robot stories all polished up and ready. We'll be open for an additional week at the back end for writers of color and LGBTQ plus authors. So y'all have an extra week to polish things up. We just announced some of our stretch goals. I don't know, Elliot, if you saw, but we've got a Jason Sanford story lined up. He wrote Plague Birds, which is a novel published by Apex Book Company that fits into Robotic Ambitions themes a lot. He's going to be doing a short story in that world for us to put into Robotic Ambitions. We're also opening up an additional slot for submitted authors. We have an essay written by Gerald Coleman called Bug or Feature, Will Skynet Be Racist? Which I read a couple weeks ago to kind of get myself jazzed up, and it's a blast to read. He's got away with words. And
Have
then
you ever seen that series, Better Off Ted?
yes, yeah, I was actually just thinking about Better Off Ted earlier today.
One of my all-time favorite episodes of television deals with the built-in racism of technology.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the doors at the company would not open for a black employee. It's so well done, and Gerald he doesn't reference Better Off Ted, but what he's talking about is in that same area.
Mm-hmm.
So it is fascinating read.
Yeah. And then we have a Q&A with Agana Chovwe, who's one of the featured authors. He tells us a little bit about the ideas that he has for a story for Robotic Ambitions, and where he came from in his writing career. And if you haven't checked out his work, he just became a finalist for Nebula for his short story Destiny Delayed, which was reprinted in the most recent issue of Apex magazine that came out this week. So those are all things we have coming up as stretch goals for anyone out there who's interested. We've got 2 other little things that we're going to be teasing as we get through the mid-campaign blues. We just lined up a very special, to my heart, stretch goal for a hush hush guest forward that I'm really looking forward to talking more about once we get through the first few stretch goals. And then for those of you who have been looking at or loving Strange Libations, which is a collection of microfiction we did for our last Kickstarter, we heard how much you loved that, so we've got a something in the pipeline that we're gonna be announcing soon that's very similar. I think that's it. We were talking about robotic ambitions. So let's take some questions from the chat. And as always, we're going to start with our favorite first question for Elliott. Prepare yourself. If you could write for any license or IP, what would it be?
Oh, well, I, so I actually would write for, I think, League of Legends.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
You
So,
knew right off the bat.
well, so I feel like I answered this question like ahead of time somewhere. I don't know. Maybe somebody else asked me this question, but I so I have been playing League of Legends since season one. I've been playing like for over, what is that, like 12 years now or
Oh,
something
wow.
like that. And so I really love the video game, and they came out with the show Arcane,
Which is excellent.
last year.
It's so
which
good.
is amazing, right? Even if you don't like League of Legends, like the show is amazing. And so I have always wanted to be involved in that IP. I think probably about 8 or 9 years ago, I looked into how do you write for League of Legends, and I think it was too complicated for me to even try to apply. I didn't have the credentials, but I definitely would totally write for that IP in a heartbeat. I think that they just are doing such clever things, and I love the lore that they've created around the game.
Yeah. And it's wild to think that because 12 years ago, there was like almost no lore. Like it was just kind of a amalgamation of like, well, this guy's got guns and this guy's got, a giant syringe and this guy's got magic. And they put it all together and it works in such a weird way. And I agree that even if you don't like the League of Legends or you know nothing about it, Arcane is a fantastic show. And my writing group has dissected the pilot of that show down to its core. And one of the things that I didn't notice until somebody at my writing group brought it up, and I'm sorry, I'm going to derail us so hard here, is every time a new character comes on screen, their first piece of dialogue is very, very cleverly written to be their motivation or their goal in some indirect way. That always is the thing that comes around by the end of the show to show their growth. And it's done in such a way that it feels like, it feels very normal. It feels very natural because a lot of it is mid-conversation. But it's just so layered that it feels so good. So yeah, there's my go watch Arcane. Please watch Arcane. It's so good. Anybody else? If we have folks in the audience with questions for Elliott, shoot them in now. We have folks disappearing. I think there might be some other live stream event because...
Well, no, they're going to go read a still life.
Oh, I hope so.
I do too. So, Elliott, what are some of your AI-centric favorite stories or authors who have written books about the subject?
Okay. I don't know that I have read widely enough in terms of AI. But I really like Ray Bradbury has this story about it's basically like a smart house that is I think it's called There Will Come Soft Rains, that I really adore, about this house that, I guess it's kind of reminiscent of a still life in the way that it's a house that is still standing after there's been a nuclear bomb. and there are no people there for it to serve anymore. But it just like keeps going until it burns down. And so that I really like that story. And I actually probably one of my favorite like narratives though is Ex Machina, the film.
Mm-hmm.
So I really probably watched that 5 or 6 times, and I just always keep coming back to it. I think that that's a really interesting portrayal of AI, in that it's almost the opposite, in that we have AI who you know convinces us that they have feelings and empathy and some sort of humanity, but doesn't actually have those pieces, and really is just self-serving. So yeah,
Mm.
I like that one a lot.
So on the opposite end of that spectrum, there's Blade Runner 2049. Have you seen that one?
I actually watched that for the first time about 2 or 3 months ago. Yeah, so I saw that one recently. Um, yeah, with the basically like the wife or the girlfriend hologram. Is
Mm-hmm.
that yeah? Um,
And Agent K's he's has this initial belief that he may be the son of Decker
mhm.
from the first movie, and which would make him part human. Uh, and he finds out the truth of that, and um, the sacrifice he makes at the end. That movie was one of the rare ones that made me have feelings. So uh, I don't talk about it a lot for that reason, but it is. I thought it was a powerful depiction of like uh, reason and consciousness and why an entity, an artificial being, would want to be human. So,
I agree. I really enjoyed that movie too. I wanted him to be part human almost because
mm-hmm.
how much he wanted it. Yeah, so it was well done.
Yeah. Uh, are there any like books that you would recommend people to check out?
Yeah, I was just gonna say I got one that's what was your favorite spec fic book that came out last year?
Um, I'm not sure. I don't know that I've read any new releases from last year. Um,
Shame.
I know it's so bad.
Yeah.
I have the like best science fiction anthology 2021 sitting on my or 2022 sitting on my like my bedside table to read through all of those, but uh, yeah, shame on me. So can you please give me some recommendations actually of what I need to read that's recently come out?
Many.
Yeah.
There's no shame. We got decades of wonderful books to read. So the only shame that you should feel is that your immediate response wasn't like Plague Birds or something from Apex.
Right.
Yeah,
I will.
yeah.
I haven't read Birds, so I'll have to put that on my list for sure.
Okay, I can hook you up with a copy of that. I know a guy.
Sounds great.
Things that you should read that were recent releases. Um, August Kitco in the Mechas from Space is a fun one by Alex White. It is a rock and roll space opera about controlling mechs with the power of music. Um, it's got some fun AI stuff in there. Um, let's see. Murderbot. If you haven't read any Martha Wells Murderbot, you should definitely uh, check that out because it's got a lot of great robotic ambitions feels. What else, Jason?
Well, those were both excellent. I am like Elliot. I don't have a great encyclopedia of modern, as in extremely contemporary books read.
Hmm.
Uh, I have been so involved in reading short fiction and books for the magazine or for the publications to publish, um, that I am woefully behind. I did just finish Dead Silence by S.A. Barnes.
Oh yeah, that was pretty good.
Yeah, so if you like Dark SF and something that feels like an Apex story, but novel form, that would be a good one to check out. Um,
Mickey
um,
Seven, I think it's a novella, but it's about a guy who lives on a like interplanetary colony, and he's the like go-to engineer, and they download his consciousness so that he, because they send him in to do the like, oh, you have to go outside the dome, so you're gonna die, but we can't keep hiring people because we're here from a generation ship. So we just keep printing you a new body and uploading your consciousness into it and sending you on these suicide missions.
it sounds a lot like the Richard K. Morgan Altered Carbon books,
Yeah.
which I adore. I would recommend people read. Um, we also, if you go to our got writers guideline page for robotic ambitions, there is a list. I think there's 6 stories that Leslie and I have selected for the magazine over since our relaunch in 2021, um, that have the feel of what we're hoping will be in robotic ambitions.
Oh, I didn't know that you did that.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah, includes Beth Dawkins and Scott Edelman, um, Amal Singh, uh, some really good writers, some fantastic stories. So, uh, yeah, if you want to get an early taste,
Mm-hmm.
I guess I need to link a still life up on there. I reference it, saying that it will be available through the Kickstarter, but I don't have a link to the actual update that you made on there. So, um, uh, Elliot, where else can we read more Elliott fiction?
Um, so I have been publishing, like I said earlier, some works on Amazon. I have two series going right now. One is a series of pretty short sci-fi novels. It's called the Far Light series, and
Mm-hmm.
starts with my image for that one was a pilot who had just killed her captain, or a dead captain was sitting right next to her. So stranded in space. So that one's kind of space opera. I just finished the third book in that one, so that one should be coming out pretty soon, in a month or so. And then the other one's actually kind of cozy fantasy. It's they're collections of 3 short stories interconnected that are just like seem like lower stakes, and just like a warm hug. I feel like
Mm-hmm.
so that's what I've been doing. So those are called Barrett the Vicious and Other Stories in Antera, and then there's a second one there too. So you can just find me on Amazon. That's where people should go for now.
Awesome.
Okay. How are you finding the self publishing experience? Is this obviously enjoy writing? Do you enjoy the publishing and editing side as well?
So I enjoy writing. I enjoy editing. I have learned everything. I know how to format. I can make my own covers now. They probably aren't quite as good as professionally made covers, but I think they're pretty. So
Mm-hmm.
I know like all the sides, and marketing is the absolute worst one, and I am terrible at it. So I I recognize that that is a weak point for me, and I don't know that I will self-publish forever. I wanted to try it. I knew it was an avenue that was available to me. I thought it would be interesting, and I have some more strategies to try to get my name out there a little bit more. But I mean, I enjoy a lot of parts of it. The marketing is hard for anyone who is thinking about going to self-publishing. It is hard screaming your name out into the void. But so I think maybe my next big work, I might try and do a traditional route for it. But we'll just kind of see. I feel like I have a lot of writing to do in my future anyway. So see how it all works out.
Good.
That's awesome. Have you done the like convention circuit and tried any of that? Like,
so not really. I started self-publishing a little over a year ago, probably like a year and 4 months or something like that. So I haven't. I just feel like there's still kind of COVID times. I don't know. There's not a lot right near me, so I haven't done a lot of in-person stuff. I've mostly relied on social media, which is
yeah,
so,
yeah.
That's understandable.
That's something that I am looking forward to doing at some point.
Great. Cool. I hope to see you on the convention circuit at some point.
Absolutely.
But until then, we are out of time, so we're going to wrap up. If you want to read more Elliott, go check out her stuff on Amazon. Check out A Still Life.
Do you have a website?
Oh, I do. It's just elliottwink.com.
Mm-hmm.
There you go.
Elliott.
Sorry to cut you off, Will. But
You're good.
helping her out with the self-promotion.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
And then you can also check out A Still Life through Robotic Ambitions. If you haven't backed Robotic Ambitions, go chuck $8 at it to get the digital version and read A Still Life right away. And issue 136 of Apex just dropped this week, so if you haven't read that, go grab a copy. And other than that, we will see you next time.
Thank you so much, Elliott. It's been a pleasure to meet you and get to talk to the person behind the story.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I have to say I might appreciate the initial rejection now because I've done nothing but talk about how wonderful my story is this whole time. It's been lovely.
It's a writer's dream, right? Getting to talk about your work. And
All right, and thanks to all the audience members chatting in the chat and watching us. Thank you guys so much.